Let's go ahead. All right, welcome everybody to the distribution maintainers meeting for Tuesday, September 13. We'll go ahead and get kicked off with the topics here. It looks like DJ has the first one.
Yeah, first item I threw on here was acknowledging some new maintainers in the past. It's been, I guess, 4 weeks now that since our last maintainers meeting. So yeah, I wanted to formally announce or re-announce rather that Robert has been made maintainer of the CNG project. So congrats to Robert. And then also the week before that happened, we also had Mitch becoming a maintainer in the GitLab chart. So congratulations, Mitch, and welcome to the project again as a maintainer.
Thanks, DJ. I believe you have the next one too.
Yeah, so related to charts maintainer specifically, I have an MR open that kind of outlines some scoping of maintainership duties in the charts that divides, that separates out like architectural decisions from the maintainership duty. And so I would, it was, we wanted to get some wording in there, and I threw some wording through this together, and it's not a high priority to get merged, but it's one of those things where I would love for folks to take a look in and provide feedback, and we can get it cleaned up and merged at some point here. And then I think the more interesting topic to actually discuss is a comment Balu had in there. So Balu had a suggestion of not just for charts, but for I think probably any of our release distribution released projects, also having a scope that is focused, a scope maintainership section that is for like the CI and release specific things as well. So Balu, I don't know if you have anything else to add there, wanted to speak on.
Yeah, in other words, Balu wants maintainership to unbreak releases on all the projects without troubling maintainers. So that was essentially my reasoning for it. But jokes aside, all the projects has a relatively complex CA system, even the newer projects like Operator. So the entire development, build and release part of the CA, like that entire CA part of every project is complex on its own, that it takes non-trivial amount of familiarity to make changes to the CA, which I think warrants a separate section for maintainers, or separate group of maintainers for these sections. We have been improving CI so that this does not happen, but by the sheer amount of things that our pipelines had to do, and because of the different audiences we have for our artifacts, these pipelines are not going to get simpler than a limit. So I think having dedicated maintainers, or having people who have enough knowledge just on the CA side does make sense.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if that should be a role that's built into GitLab itself.
I mean, we have release managers and they kind of know how stuff happens in our projects, but they are not actively developing or actively looking at our pipelines. They are more focused on the Rails side, because that's where all the major things happen. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't mind a separate role in GitLab, but
Oh yeah, no, I meant like a role assigned to your account that would give you permission to go in and see all the CI settings, but not necessarily to merge to master, you know.
Okay, yeah, different types of maintainers.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Instead of an all-encompassing, yeah.
Yeah, I'm also on board with this idea with scoping out the maintainership of CI related items and the release related items and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the question for me becomes, I think we need to come up with like a communication plan that makes it clear that like typically you wouldn't be assigning MRs to them for reviewers unless they included, like it's more like a specialty, right? Like they're not in the general bucket of, I shouldn't say reviewers, but they're not in the general bucket of MR maintainers, right? That it's more of when you come to a specialty area like the CI that you might engage them. So I think we have to come up with a way to communicate that or document that. Currently, like in terms of maintainers, of course, our reviewers are typically the ones who are assigning maintainers. But separately from that, we have like the maintainer, like the project maintainer item in GitLab.com repo for your username, right? And so I guess there's also a specialty there, but I think that's probably where I'd like to take the conversation next. Then is like how do we articulate this in a way that folks aren't just like auto assigning them as maintainers on merge requests. Not, I shouldn't say auto assigning, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think that's the only thing for me is communicating it that way. For the current charts one, is easy because we're kind of doing the opposite, right? For the proposal I have in there, and for Mitch, the idea is that MR reviews do come to you or do come to that version of the maintainer, right? And then it's on that person to know when to engage the decision makers and the architects on things. So that one's a little bit easier in that it doesn't really require a change for others. It really is, the maintainers themselves able to kind of figure it out there. So yeah, I think that would having some sort of communication plan or something, or looking at that, I think would be the next action item here, I think.
One reviewer roulette has fixed it, like they have stuff in place to assign maintainers based on specialty. Two, we can start using code owner files for CA related files, so at least they show up as suggested approvers. So I think we can, we haven't been using many of the GitLab review related features like code owners or specific approvers and stuff like that. We can start looking into the available features in GitLab, the product itself, and see where that gets us.
Yeah, it sounds promising. Both I wasn't aware. Well, I know that like reviewer roulette allowed to break out like database and front end and back end. I wasn't quite sure if those were like already hard fixed or if those were things that it would be able to like pull from something more dynamic that we could add in. But yeah, I think that would probably be the solution paired with the code owners. Does sound good.
Yeah, that would be nice. Maybe we could even, just as an in-between step, update the MR template and say, if it's just a regular review, send it to one of the distribution team members, and then for maintainer review, send it to Mitch. If it's got more architecture, deep changes, then send it to Jason. If it's CI related, send it to Balu. Until we have some way of automating it with the product itself. Might be an easy implementation. All righty, good discussion. The link is in there to keep the discussion going. Moving on here to the maintainer discussion issues. The first one here was open right by Robert. I don't believe he's on the call, but effectively it's around whether pipelines should have default values or whether they should be left out and populated when they're triggered. I see DJ has a comment in here.
Yeah, I threw I think more. I didn't really throw an opinion on there. I more threw some context onto how that happened. Um, and I think Jason threw opinion, but the context on how it happened was really, we have the UBI images and we have um, the regular Debian images, and they were created at different times and with a little bit different ideas. So the Debian ones, when they were first created, we didn't have a fully working CI pipeline. So the builds had to work locally, running Docker build and having them work locally using Docker build. The easiest thing is to throw defaults into those args within the Docker files rather than have to have someone populating those. We could have wrote a script or something like that, but we knew we were going to be doing CI, so we didn't bother. Well, that's not true. We do have a bit of a script, but for the most part, it was that way. And then by the time we got to the UBI ones, we clearly had the CI pipelines, and we had the versions file, the CI versions file that already had a lot of those defaults in it, and it felt like we were just duplicating effort. But I think there's like the same argument could still be made that putting defaults in makes it easier to build outside of CI, but it duplicates where you need to update things. So I personally don't have a strong opinion, but I just thrown some comments there on how it ended up like that.
Yeah, I think it is nice when things fail if they're not set up perfectly, but then you start looking through Docker files and it's just an empty arg and you have no idea what should be populated there. So you've got to go digging to where that Docker file gets called to build, etc. So maybe we can find a good solution there. This next one is opened by Robert as well. It's about long-term maintenance of language frameworks. Looks like specifically this was sparked by the process of Go, which we've had some trouble updating across the various projects. So he's got a good layout of the problem and how to improve it in that issue. Any specific updates or questions on that one? Alrighty, we will move into the section where we talk about some mentionable changes to the various projects. So we'll start off with the Helm charts. Robert has the first one. There was an update for Golang and CNG. I don't have an MR linked here, so let me go see if I can grab it.
I can comment.
Okay.
Golang has been updated to 1.17.13, 1.17.13, which is the latest in 1.17 series. We are looking at updating to Go 1.18 or 1.19, but that is a broader work across the company.
Thanks, Bala. Jason's got the next one here. Ensure container scanning jobs run for FIPS pipelines. He's not on, so I'll mention what it does. In the past, we were running container scanning for releases out of dev, but this also enables them for pipelines on FIPS. So ensures that we're scanning those as well. I'm also working on adding that process to our Nginx fork, our true fork that's getting forked from GitHub. So working on adding in that process so that we ensure that all our containers for charts are being scanned by that utility. I'll put a link to that MR here in a second too. Already on to Omnibus. Robert's got the first one, going update in Omnibus. Bala, do you happen to have an update on that as well? Probably the 1.17 update too.
Yeah, so it's the same thing as CNG. We are bumping Golang version to 1.17.13. I can comment on the other items also. So both of
Awesome.
those are from me. Essentially, we are cleaning up the Omnibus GitLab CA pipeline. The first one is where we are replacing YAML anchors with extents. Why we did that is eventually we want to split the CA configuration to multiple files based on themes, like all the build jobs go to one, all the release ones go to another, spec tests go to another. YAML anchors cannot be used across files. For that, the GitLab solution is to use extents or reference tags. So this is like a prerequisite for that split. The next one is moving the multi-project package and QA pipeline as a child pipeline. So those who develop on Omnibus GitLab knows that we have a trigger job to run package and QA, like build a package, build a Docker image, run QA against that image setup. We have been using a separate mirror project for this, Omnibus GitLab mirror, which that process was broken sometimes, especially during security releases when mirroring is stopped. So the commit in canonical repository is not present in the mirror repository. So you cannot actually trigger a pipeline against that commit. So this MR essentially takes the mirror project out of the picture. We are now using a child pipeline. So all the build jobs happen in the canonical repository itself, which hopefully should make our lives a little bit easier. And I have the next item. So in anticipation of some security issues in Grafana and the fact that we are still bundling a version of Grafana that no longer gets security updates, we can't upgrade Grafana due to license issues. We have stopped enabling Grafana by default for new installations. For existing users and existing installations who are upgrading to newer versions, their existing settings will still work. Like if they have disabled Grafana, we won't auto enable them. If they didn't do anything and had a Grafana running, it would still be running. But for fresh installations, we will not be enabling Grafana by default. The next one is refactor of the console or failover related logic of PostgreSQL. No functionality change, but we just made it easier to tinker with and extend out if you need to add other components to the failover, not just one default Postgres installation. Maybe we want to do HA for Petroni databases. Maybe we want to do HA for the registry database that is coming up. So we can use the same watcher logic for those scenarios also. So those are the Omnibus related ones. Back to you, Mitch, for operator.
Thanks, Bala. I just wanted to mention here, we removed the blocking wait components in the operator effectively for every reconcile loop whenever we reached a process like migrations where we have to ensure that they're complete before moving on to the next step. We would effectively just for loop within that one reconcile loop and wait. That meant that if you applied any other changes to the operator, it would be effectively asleep while it was focusing on that product change. And so now we better follow the operator standards, and if there's something to wait for, we'll exit the loop and requeue to check again later. That way it ensures that the operator's listening for any changes and we don't get kind of hung up on any long running processes there too. So a good structural change under the hood there that gets us closer to production ready environments. Alrighty, any other topics, questions, updates? There's the crickets. Alrighty, thank you everybody. See you next time.